Plot 13. I open my eyes, yet they do not see. I reach out with my hands, yet I am constrained. I inhale deeply, but dank air fills my lungs. Where am I? My mind races as I try to remember how I got in this predicament. It's pitch blackness that greets me. It is silence that welcomes me. Loneliness and solitude, my only companion. I feel the walls that served as my prison. Wood. They are roughly cut. I get a splinter in my hand. It seems to be fashioned for my size. It is a near perfect fit. The walls seem to creep closer, suffocating me. The air in my lungs turns to tar. It slithers down my throat, threatening to choke me. I can't breathe. There is no airflow. No, this isn't true. I feel a tube on the top of my container above my head. There is a hole about the size of a quarter and fresh air is flowing through it. Still, my traitorous lungs heave. It is not lack of oxygen. It is claustrophobia. I am trapped in a tiny box and I don't know how to get here. I can hardly move. There is no light. Panic has seized my limbs and I beat a steady staccato on the ceiling of my cell. In a rush, I find my voice and I begin to scream. Pleading, begging, weeping for anyone to help. This must be an accident. I can't be locked away. I cannot rightly say how long I screamed. Long after my vocal cords became sore. My voice cracked and still my mouth uttered broken words. Eventually all I could manage was little whimpers. At some point I passed out. I woke up to the sound of music off in the distance. Sad music. The kind played at a funeral. A dirge. I felt oddly melancholy and reserved. It was a queer experience to be present for one's own funeral. That must be it. I must be buried alive and now they are having memorial service at the grave. My voice cracked, my lymph nodes swollen. I could hardly make a squeak, yet alone something that would drown out that lonely song. Still, my abused throat tried its hardest to produce some kind of protest to the unfairness of it all. The sound that reverberated in the hollow coffin was that of a dying animal. Perhaps that is exactly what I was in the moment. Trapped, nothing but the thuds of dirt covering my final resting place. Those solid thumps. An assault to my sanity. I couldn't help myself. I grew desperate. Tears streaming, snot bubbling, absolutely no care for sensibilities. My fingertips began to bleed as I picked relentlessly at the coffin ceiling. Blood ran down my forearm unchecked. I ravaged my hands trying to escape my cell, yet the stubborn boards would not give. The faint echoes of the gravedigger's task haunted me. My heart shattered with each shovelful of dirt, every handful of gravel, a final nail in my coffin. It was a cruel trick. They couldn't hear me, and now there was no hope. I was 6 feet under, yet somehow I was still conscious. What was I to do? I couldn't claw my way through my jail cell, nor could I unbury myself. All motivation fled me. I became stoic in the face of my premortem burial. There was nothing left to do. The funeral song set me at ease. Peace like I have never experienced flooded my mind. Vantage chordal. It's all too ironic. Here I am laying in my grave, yet I have never experienced such complete solace. It was as if I waited my whole life for this moment to truly begin living. The dirge tapered off. I was left in silence once again, although this time it didn't bother me. I was over the claustrophobia. The darkness no longer scared me. The lack of companionship no longer a factor. I was awaiting the eternal slumber. No fear. No hesitation. Eyes closed in everlasting rest. Me and my thoughts, no distractions. I was thinking clearer than I ever had. Life meant something more. A deepening happened. My soul stretched, and the barrier between the life and the next was nearly non-existent. I felt as if I would press against the veil. It would yield. I was where no living mortal had ever been. I lay in my grave alive, yet closer to the hereafter than a living being. The greatest mystery was in my lap. What happens after we die? It was at this moment I heard the whisper. I do hope you are comfy down there. Might be a long time before you get out. I would hate for you to have to spend your last remaining hours in discomfort. The voice was odd. Almost as if it didn't belong to a person. It was as rough and cracked as the rustic coffin I was being held hostage. Almost as if the man had not communicated often. The words were awkward and not entirely formed in the stranger's mouth. quite like someone learning a new language who has yet grown confident in his speech. The voice sent me on alert. The hair on the back of my neck stood. His voice was like nails on a chalkboard. It was wrong. Not that it wasn't pleasant or irritating, but not natural. Like hearing the mimic giving a parrot speaking human words. The man's voice reverberated down the same pipe the fresh air was flowing. I thought how strange that was. How many coffins have aeration systems built into it? After all, dead men don't need to breathe. Something was wrong. People don't get buried alive by accident. Coffins these days are not roughly crafted pine boxes. Also, no one talks to those under the earth. This man knew something. Perhaps could even assist me. I quickly began to plead with the man. Please, sir, I'm buried alive. Dig me up, call for help. For the love of God, do something. The man's response caught me off guard. Wrong. Love God, I do not. I can't stop now. You've been selected for Plot 13. This is your home now. Don't worry. I will care for you. Silence enveloped me. I was dumbstruck, completely caught off guard. Never could I have imagined someone outright refused to assist another in their time of need. Life and death are a sacred ritual. No one is that callous. This man held my life in his hands and regarded me with so little care. I was a plaything to him, a pet trapped in a dank, dark cage. In a voice hardly audible, I asked, What is Plot 13? Clearly the man anticipated his question. His answer was nearly immediate, his response. Plot 13 is the burial spot for David Simon Barnover, an electrician who accidentally fired himself when he grabbed a live wire. As if this was an afterthought, the man added, Oh yeah, it's also the resting place for you too. What? There's no one else down here. I cried out in indignation. Of course not. No one in the same coffin. He is directly above you. I'm sure you heard his funeral procession a few hours ago, said the stranger in an oddly cheery voice. I was caught off guard once again by this man's carelessness, almost teasing manner. It was as if he were old friends or something. What in the hell is going on here? Why am I in this coffin buried underneath someone else? This has to be some kind of accident, I demanded. My captor let out a belly laugh that harbored real mirth. God, you're slow, aren't you? I was hoping for someone a little brighter, perhaps, but beggars can't be choosers, am I right? You are here, of my design. I snuck into that quaint little apartment you kept on 2nd Street while you were sleeping. I drugged you. You never heard me come through the unlatched window. I shoved your heavy ass into a rolling suitcase, and voila, you woke up inside the coffin I crafted for you. I buried you in Plot 13 in the pre-dug hole for the unfortunate David Barnover. I'm a pretty hard worker. No one even noticed that I dug the hole twice as deep as usual. To cover the night, I lowered your coffin into the hole, covered you over with dirt, and no one was the wiser. Absolutely flabbergasted by this man's recounting of the events of the previous night, I asked, Why? Why what? Said the man, genuinely perplexed. Why did you abduct me, bury me alive? What did I do to you to deserve this? I don't even know you. We met once. You served me my coffee. You seemed nice, and Mama kept telling me that I needed friends, said the man as if to clear everything up. So, you buried me alive so I could be your friend? I belted out, completely outraged. All he said was, Yep. Why the hell didn't you just try talking to me like a normal-ass person? I shouted. I did. You were too busy to talk to me. No one takes the time to listen. In some ways, I prefer talking to the dead. They don't interrupt. My mama doesn't approve when I talk to them, hence why the coffin, responded the man in a matter-of-fact tone. Because your mom told you to make friends you kidnap? I answered, hardly able to understand. Mama gets so angry, I can't disobey Mama. She'll put me in the box if I do, said the voice, panic clearly beginning to form. Box? What do you mean? I questioned. I don't want to think about the box. Please don't make me think of the box. As he said this, he began to grow more frantic. I heard a smacking sound followed by a cry of pain. A smack, then pain. This happened in rapid succession. It took me a second to realize the man was hitting himself in the face. Whatever this box was, it had worked up. A thought creeped in my mind. I heard a smacking sound followed by a cry of pain. A smack, then pain. This happened in rapid succession. It took me a second to realize the man was hitting himself in the face. Whatever this box was, it worked up. A thought creeped in my mind. If I can keep him talking, maybe I will find something I can leverage for escape. This might be my only chance. I figured if I could get him to tell me about this box, maybe I could use this. You never told me your name. I can't be your friend until I know it, I said. My name's Dennis. You should know that. You wrote it on my coffee cup and called it out when I came to visit you. It was loud in there, Dennis. I could hardly hear you. Sorry I didn't recognize the voice. I remember you now. I didn't say much to you because I was so nervous. Do you ever get nervous? At this point, I was fairly certain that he would understand. My goal is simple. Get him to think we are friends. And I'd get him to slip some information while his guard is down. Nervous? Do you get nervous around people too? Mama always said to stop being a baby, but living people scare me. They can think and stuff. The bodies that Barry can't do that. They never have mean things to say either. Living people are cruel. I never know what they are thinking or planning. What if they want to hurt me? Exclaimed the excited stranger. Mama doesn't seem to understand, does she? I remarked. No, she doesn't. I tried to explain it to her one time, but she left me in the box. She scares me more than anyone else, he responded. All of a sudden, the smacking sound resumed, louder than before. That was a horrid thing to say about Mama. Mama is good. Mama is nice. Mama's the only one who will care about me, said the pained voice of the man echoing down the tube. It's okay. Mama isn't here. You're with your best friend. Feel free to tell me anything. This box, for example. I won't tell Mama, I promise. I responded with a certain wheedling in my voice. Dennis grew silent, seemed to mull over my request. I can tell from the stretched silence that I'm close to winning him over. I racked my brain to find something this insane person could relate with. It hit me at the moment. In a moment of clarity, I knew what to say. I heard my mouth form the words. My mama loved me a lot too. She also would try to protect me from the mean people as well. She thought if she kept me away from everyone, then I would never be hurt. By protecting, she didn't even know she was hurting me. Does your mama accidentally hurt you too? I heard a choking sob reverberate down the tunnel, followed by silence. My words seemed to have found a home. I allowed the words to sink in, letting them have the most effect. After a moment or two, I heard Dennis clearing his voice, making a valiant attempt to recover from the unexpected emotion. His raspy voice exclaimed, Mama says she loves me and that is why she has to punish me. She locks me in the box in the dark. I'm scared of the dark. The voices are too loud down there. There's not enough room in the tiny box for the two of us. Two of us? I thought you were locked in the box alone. I questioned. No, she locks me in the box with her. It is too cramped. It smells down there. I have to lay on top of her to be room for two of us, he responded, sounding agitated again. Dennis, tell me, where is this box? I had a sinking feeling, as if my world was made of lead and I had just been tossed in the sea. I felt as if I could not keep my head above the water. All the rekindled hope I had been experiencing had suddenly turned to a fire in my innards. As if to prove my concern, he opened his mouth and said, Plot 1. Dread filled me. I knew the truth. Mama was dead, and here I am, trapped in the box like him. There was no persuading him to let me go. Like me, he was equally buried alive. Even though he was still walking the surface world, I knew the human part of him was lying with his mother in Plot 1. So, here I lie, buried in an unmarked grave. No, that is not entirely true. I lie awake under the restful sleep of David Barnover. I don't know how long I will last 12 feet under the ground. I do know this. I am not alone. Dennis comes to keep me company and slide food down the chute 3 times a day. He is as dependable as the sun. Every time he arrives at the same time, every day he retreats at the same time. I do not hold any ill will toward the broken man. Yes, he is my captor. Most definitely he ruined my life. However, I myself have come to understand a thing or two about loneliness. It can consume you. The actions of a lonely man should be forgiven. Who knows, if given the means, I might condemn someone in the box as well, if only to sate my unquenchable desire for companionship. The door. In the weak light of the porch lamp, the door stood illuminated. The wood was splintering and the gray paint was flaking heavily. At eye level there were patches of paint missing, showing their year's worth of knuckles had rapped against the wood. To the left of the door, encased in a dusty glass lamp, a weak light bulb glowed softly, casting a ray of yellow light. A single moth fluttered around the glass, its wings moving so quickly they were nothing but a blur. It tapped relentlessly against the glass, desperately trying to reach the light. I watched it struggle for several seconds, but my eyes wandered past the moth and down the porch steps where the light did not reach. Beyond the steps, the darkness was so thick I couldn't tell what street I was on, or if I was on a street at all. The porch was large, mostly vacant, save a single wooden rocking chair that looked as old and weathered as the door. Heavy silence hung in the air, only broken by the tapping of the moth against the glass. Its wings fluttered madly. I turned my attention back to the door. I raised my fist slowly and knocked. For several seconds I waited and the questions began to form in my mind. Before I could search for answers, I heard footsteps on the other side of the door and the doorknob turned. The door opened and in the yellow light a pale face appeared. It was an old man who wore what appeared to be an even older tuxedo. His face was lined and wrinkled, and under the sagging folds of his chin was a black bow tie. His eyes, gray and watery, glanced from me to the porch light, and the moth continued its determined struggle. "Damn thing," he muttered. "Come in." He moved aside and held the door open. My eyes darted towards the steps. Come on, I don't have eternity," said the butler. More out of the pressure to be polite than the logic, I found myself crossing over the threshold. The butler shut the door behind me. "She'll be with you soon. Please, wait here." Without another word, the man shambled out of the room. When he was gone, I looked around the room I had entered. The living room, much like the porch, was large but fairly empty. There were 2 sofas facing each other, each with the same floral pattern. They looked to be taken from a previous era, probably the 1920s, except, unlike the door and the rocking chair, they seemed brand new. Against the far wall was a massive hearth in which a fire roared, the flames devouring the pile of logs in the grates. It was surprising to see a fire lit on a July night, but regardless of the summer heat and the fire, the room was still chilly. I found myself inching closer to the flames for warmth. Against the wall was the grandfather clock. The wood was deep, rich color, mahogany if I had to guess. Where the face of the clock was supposed to be were instead several circles, which rotated counterclockwise, some overlapping each other. Around each circle were several symbols, but none I had ever seen before in any math class. The circles each had hands as well, but more than 2 as they spun in different directions. The complexity of the patterns were confusing, and I found I couldn't stare too long at the cluttered, complicated design. I turned away, looking at the mantel above the fireplace where several small, crystal figurines were lined. Normally I would have found such things tacky, but they were so well crafted I couldn't feel but a sense of awe as I gently touched the figurine of a horse. The firelight cast light into the crystal and cast a shadow of the horse against the wall. "So sorry to keep you waiting," said a voice. I jumped and turned to see a beautiful woman standing in the doorway. She was stunning, a figure out of some sort of fairy tale. She wore a black dress which glittered and shone in the firelight. Her hair was pitch black and had a gentle curl as it cascaded down her shoulders. Her eyes were a deep chestnut brown, almost as dark as her hair. Her skin, however, was pale without a hint of a single blemish or freckle. Her arms, smooth and soft, lay gently across her front. She appeared to wear no makeup, but her beauty was flawless regardless. I found myself staring, open-mouthed, at this figure. "No problem," I found myself saying, although, in fact, there were many problems in all of this. The mysterious hostess glanced at the grandfather clock that wasn't a clock and smiled. You are right on time. Perfect. On time for what? I asked, feeling so helplessly lost and stupid. Benjamin? The woman called over her shoulder, ignoring my question. Please get our guest here some champagne. The old man who had opened the door appeared again from the shadows and nodded before vanishing again. The woman turned back to me, but this time she wore a dazzling smile. I probably can't stay too long, I began. The questions that had begun brewing in the back of my mind the moment I found myself in front of the door began to boil over, forcing themselves to the front of my mind. Where am I? I asked the woman. Who are you? How did I get here? The woman smiled at me, and she was again safe from answering as the butler appeared, carrying 2 flutes of champagne. The flutes, like the figurines above the fireplace, were made of fine, delicate crystal, and I could tell they were probably cost a fortune. The woman handed me the flute. Cheers, she said, and raised the glass to her lips and took a sip. I followed suit, my body seeming to betray my mind, and even in all the confusion and anxiety, was startled by the taste of what was to be the finest champagne I had ever tasted. I looked down to the glass, watching the soft gold liquid bubble and fizz. I forced my mind to focus, to remember. How had I gotten here? I remember being at the office, packing up my things and saying goodbye to my coworkers as they made their way out of the front door for the day. I walked to my car in the parking lot and chose a station on the radio. 87.5 FM, classic rock. The car had been hot from baking in the sun all day, and I had rolled down the windows to get some fresh air. I had meant to drive straight home. I didn't have any errands to run or plans to see friends. It's going to be a quiet night watching TV in bed until I fell asleep. Yet, here I was, standing in this house, holding a glass of champagne and wondering how I could have possibly gotten here. How do you like it, Abby? She asked. I raised my eyes from the glass and met hers. How do you know my name? She smiled again. When you're finished, we can get you settled and Benjamin can show you to your room. After that, we can talk. With that, she left the room and I was alone once more. I reached to my side to grab my cell phone from the purse and found, much to my surprise and dismay, it wasn't there. I had been so distracted I hadn't even noticed the familiar weight of the bag against my hip was missing. I patted down my pockets, but they were empty. No sign of my wallets or keys anywhere. I must have left them in the car, I thought, turning towards the doorway. But that didn't make sense. I never left my valuables in my car. Growing up in a big city, I trained myself early on to never leave anything of value in your car and to always leave it locked. My confusion deepened, and with it, my anxiety. Something was wrong. Something was off about this place. Follow me, please, said a male voice. The butler who the woman had called Benjamin stood in the doorway. I began, but no words came. I shot a glance towards the door I had entered, but somehow it seemed more intimidating than the man who stood in front of me, beckoning me. Still holding the unfinished champagne, I followed the man through a darkened dining room down a hallway. The hallways in the house were long, almost too long to fit into a single house. Each was lined with a worn rug and had several sconces in the walls which, at the front porch light, had a light bulb which glowed dimly. There were many open doors down each hall, each open to show an empty bedroom. Some of the rooms were filled with antique beds and sofas that looked to be of different eras, like the living room had been. Others, to my surprise, were filled with modern furnishings, bunk beds with brightly colored comforters and toys which lay forgotten on rugs. Some rooms were larger than others, but each one was fully furnished and completely empty of any other person. I only had a chance to glimpse into each room as we passed. The old man seemed to move with an agility and speed that belonged to men decades younger than him. I followed him down one hallway and up another, seeming to never end. I wasn't sure how many rooms I had passed. Dozens? It seemed like it. Finally, after we went down what had to be the 13th hallway, I found myself asking, who owns this house? What am I doing here? The man didn't give any indication he had heard me whatsoever. I asked again, this time louder, but he simply carried on, neither glancing at me or into any of the open doorways we passed. He paused for a moment at the bottom of a staircase and began to ascend, his leather shoes silent against the threadbare carpet. I followed him, clutching onto the railing for support as we went up one flight, and another, and again down a series of hallways. By this time I had fallen into silence, giving up on answering questions. Finally, he stopped at a closed door and turned the crystal knob. The door swung open to reveal a bedroom, except like the others, it had its own style. There was a canopy bed against the wall with a pink comforter covered in roses. The rug on the floor was blue with a simple, delicate design. A simple vanity stood opposite against the bed. Although the room looked unused, I was surprised to find it was clean. There wasn't a speck of dust to be found, and the room smelled fresh. Faintly I could smell roses, as if the rose-patterned comforter were a real garden. "Wait here, and she will call for you," the butler said. I turned to say something, but the man had shut the door behind him, and I stood alone. I looked around, taking in this new bedroom I was in. I had a sinking feeling they intended for me to spend the night here. This thought wakened me, as if I had been in a deep sleep. I set down the champagne on the vanity and walked towards the door. "Stupid," I said to myself as I wrenched the door open and entered the hallway again. "What are you doing, following strangers into this house? Why didn't you scream and kick and run away? What's wrong with you?" I thought back to the champagne and my stomach churned. "And drinking the drink she gave you? You don't know what's in it. It probably drugged you, for God's sake." I walked swiftly down one hallway and up the next, but before long I found I couldn't remember what direction I had taken to get there. Each hallway looked to be the same, and there were so many bedrooms. I was beginning to lose track. I went down one set of stairs, then another, but nothing looked familiar. In the dim light it was hard to see anything clearly. How long had I been walking? It was impossible to tell. Panic rose in my chest, and this time I had trouble fighting it down. My eyes burned. I was hopelessly lost. Each window I walked by showed nothing but darkness. I had no idea what time of night it was. I began to pick up speed, jogging down one corridor and then another. The rooms flashed by, but I didn't bother to look into any of them. All I cared about was getting to the front door. I needed to get to the door. I was just about to turn down another hall when I heard a voice. "There you are. I just checked your room and found you weren't there. Did you decide to do some exploring?" The woman stood at the end of the hall. She was smiling, and at the night of her... The woman stood at the end of the hall. She was smiling, and at the sight of her I felt both a flush of relief and fear. I began, but no words came. She was walking towards me, and I knew I wouldn't... I began, but no words came. She was walking towards me, and I knew I should run and scream and fight, but I didn't. "Want to come sit in the living room? We can chat." I nodded, desperately wanting to get out of this endless labyrinth of hallways and empty rooms. She smiled and led me back to the living room. "You will get to know this house in time," she said, sitting on one sofa and gesturing me to the other. I sat down on the edge, where my eyes kept flashing to the door. "I can't stay long," I blurted out. "I think I'm going to go home now." I made to stand, but she simply smiled once again. "Go where?" she asked pleasantly. "Home," I said, and I couldn't stop some irritation from creeping into my voice. "What home?" My face flushed. "My home, my apartment, where I live." My voice rose, and I fought it back down. I couldn't lose control. I needed to get out of here. I stood from the sofa, my fist clenched at my side. The Woodville apartments were torn down in 2023. A grocery store is built there now. I stared at her, uncomprehending, watching the firelight dance across the alabaster surface of her face. "How do you know where I live?" I asked. My brain seemed to have stopped working, as if the gears in my mind were clogged. She simply shrugged. "I just know." "Well, you're wrong. It's 2018 and they are not torn down. I was there this morning." You were thinking of someplace else. "I don't think I am." "Your roommate Jenna had moved out by that time. She moved in with her boyfriend, who is now her husband." "How do you know this? We've never met before." She nodded. "No, we haven't." There was a pause as she stared at one another. The only thing in the room that moved from the fire in the hearth and the wheels on the clock that continued their idle spin. "How do you know where I live?" I asked. "Lived," she replied with emphasis. "I still live there. I was there this morning." "You couldn't have been. I told you it was torn down." "In 2023? 5 years from now?" 2023 was 50 years ago. My knees buckled and I stood on the sofa once again. So, you were saying I've been here for 50 years? She nodded. Yes. This time it was my turn to smile. You're insane. My words seemed to have no impact. Her face stayed still and calm. I get that a lot. It's always hard to find out. Find out what? What happened when you left the office? This afternoon? She shrugged again. If that's what it feels like, then sure. I racked my brain, struggling to think. I left the office and got in my car and drove. I paused, trying to remember. Home? She suggested. I shook my head. No, it wasn't home. Think back, she said, her voice was gentle. I shut my eyes. I got into the car and pulled onto the freeway ramp. The music was playing and I tapped my fingers against the steering wheel to the beat. Put my blinker to merge lanes and glanced over my left shoulder. There was room behind me to go over. I looked back up front and a large van suddenly entered the lane in front of me. I jerked the wheel, hard, but the car was going too fast. The radio was drowned out by the sound of tires shrieking and the windshield vanished beyond a white balloon. The road spun upside down as the asphalt became sky, and I was standing on the porch, staring at the door. I looked back at the woman and she was staring at me silently with a gentle expression on her face. What was it? Pity? I stood again and my legs shook from beneath me. No. Your car flipped and slid 30 feet. You were killed on impact. The other driver was crippled, but lived. No! I put my fist to my eyes. You were buried in the cemetery in your hometown, the one by the river. They planted roses near your grave. I can almost see it now. My parents standing above a small cement stone which bore my name. Mother would wail and cling onto my father for support as he stared stoically on, not daring to let anyone see him cry. His bottom lip would quiver, breaking the facade. My mother would visit my grave on Sunday afternoons and leave some flowers she grew in her garden. My father would keep a picture of me in his wallet and look at it once a day when he was alone and no one could see the anguish. I clenched my jaw and found myself fighting against her words, not letting myself succumb to the tide. No, I yelled. You're a liar. I'm not dead. I don't know who you are or how I got here, but I'm leaving now. Before she could say or do anything, I darted for the door and grabbed a knob. The woman called after me, told me to stop, but I didn't listen. I ran out into the porch where the night was still as dark as it had been when I arrived. The moss still continued to bang away at the glass, but I didn't stop. I ran down the steps into the inky darkness beyond and kept running, faster than I'd ever run in my life. The dim light of the porch grew faint and the darkness seemed to swallow me whole. I didn't care where I was going, as long as I put as much distance as I could between myself and the house. The ground beneath me was soft, like a combination of mud or sand I had never felt before. The light from the house became nothing but a tiny speck behind me, but I didn't slow down. With each step, my feet began to sag, the ground becoming softer and softer. It took more and more effort to draw up one leg and the other, and soon it was not possible to keep them up at all. I'm sinking, I thought with horror. I'm sinking into the earth. The strange swamp I was in slowly took in my feet, then my ankles, and soon I was up to my calves. The ground was icy cold and wet, but somehow, impossibly, it didn't seem there. It was as if I had fallen into a swamp and a chilly fog at the same time. My skin felt the wet grip of earth, but also nothing at all. But it wasn't this that frightened me the most. It was a sort of chill that was sinking into my skin. It wasn't the chill of frost on a window pane on a winter's morning, or an icy drink on a hot summer day. It was the chill that went down your spine when you were alone in the dark, and you hear a whisper in the cellar when you were sure you were alone. It was the chill you felt when you knew there were monsters beneath your bed, waiting to devour you the moment you set a foot on the floor. I gasped. I tried to wrench my feet up, but the more I struggled, the more I sank. The chill enveloped me until it reached my hips and my waist. I was sinking, seemed to some unknown vastness, and I was certain then, more than I'd ever been certain about anything in my entire life, that if I sunk into the darkness, I would never come back out again. I reached out into the darkness, desperately trying to find something to cling onto, a branch, a boulder, anything, but I only felt the empty air and cried out. I looked back over my window and saw, in the distance, the weak light in the shape of the house. Crying out with effort, I managed to turn and force my legs to keep moving through the thick swamp. Each step was agony, and the cold seemed to grow worse moment after moment. I kept my eyes focused on the light, not daring to look away in case I should lose sight of it entirely. How many No matter how many steps I took, the light didn't seem to get any closer, and I could feel despair grip me. My parents' faces swam in front of my eyes, and the lonely rose garden where a stone nearby bore my name. After what felt like an eternity, the sun ground. After what felt like an eternity, the sun ground beneath me began to feel more solid. I found with each step I was rising out of the darkness, and the porch light grew nearer. I finally saw the porch steps in front of me, and I collapsed onto them. I crawled to the porch and lay there, sobbing, my face pressed against the cool cement. Tears blurred my vision, and my thoughts were fragmented. I was barely aware of the moth against the light or how many clothes were completely dry, as if I hadn't entered the strange swamp at all. I wailed in a way I hadn't since I was a child, wanting more than ever to find myself home in bed. A hand touched my back and I gasped, my eyes fell open. I looked to see dark eyes and a pale face staring at me. "Abby," she said softly. "It's out there," I cried. She looked towards the porch steps where the darkness lay beyond. She didn't answer, but turned back to me. She stroked my hair from my face, and her hand was cold. She gently pulled me to my feet, but I didn't struggle. I had no fighting left in me. She led me back into the living room, and we sat together on the couch. I wrapped my arms around myself, but could give myself no comfort. The woman gently wiped the tears from my eyes, and her hands were cold, the same cold as the depths outside that threatened to swallow me whole. "I want to go home," I managed between my sobs. "Oh, darling," the woman said. Her voice was sweet and soft. "You are home." He won't stop staring. Today was a weird day. It was another long day at the office. Piles of paperwork stood a mile high on my desk, and it'd take hours to even make a dent in it. I couldn't have been more relieved when the clock finally hit 5 o'clock. I hightailed it out of there and went on my way. Pulled into the driveway and I couldn't help but admire what stood before me. A gorgeous two-story home layered with the highest quality brick. A 500 square foot red cedar deck out back. A luxurious pool below it, and a hot tub to boot. A perfectly symmetrical yard with lush green grass. A massive wine cellar in the basement. My wife and I had slaved away working multiple jobs each to save up for this place. Seeing the response to our offer had brought tears to our eyes. This was our dream home. As I sat in the driveway, someone pulled up right beside me. I turned my head to see what was going on. There was a man in the car. He couldn't have been more than 40. His dark hair was receding, and he had thin eyes. He looked like he was tall, likely well over 6 feet, and pale. He was also creepily thin. And he was staring at me. The discomfort I felt was instant. You know how there are some people you look at and they immediately give you the heebie-jeebies? That was this guy. I pulled forward a little. He did the same. I went a little further. So did he. That didn't work. I decided to try to play it cool now. I turned to him, smiling, and waved. The blank expression on his face didn't flinch. I don't even think he blinked. I quickly turned my head away from him and started looking forward again. Didn't matter. I could still feel his gaze. I think you all know that paranoid feeling of being watched. Well, I was being watched, and that paranoid feeling had increased tenfold. Quickly hit the lock button on my car just in case he tried to do something. Okay, maybe if I waited it out, he'd leave me alone. I kept my vision straight ahead and waited. 30 seconds passed. Then a minute. Then two. 2 turned to 4. His car hadn't moved. He hadn't left. Sweat began to trickle down my brow. If he is messing with me, he's doing a really good job. I'm freaked the hell out now. Was he going to try to hurt me? This wasn't working. I had pretended I had just gotten a phone call and picked it up. I'm not having a conversation, and I made exaggerated movements to make it seem like I'd forgotten all about him. I wanted him to believe I was on an important call while nervously looking into my periphery the entire time. He was still there. Okay, now what? I racked my brain for an answer. Maybe, just maybe, he was as uncomfortable as I was. Maybe he had the same idea as me and was pretending to take a call now or something. Despite every instinct I had begging me not to, I turned my head and looked back in his direction. He was still staring at me. Actually, I felt more like he was staring through me, like he was peering right in my soul. I could feel the goosebumps across my body en masse. It was as if it just wouldn't look away. I didn't know what to do. Should I honk? Should I give him the finger? Should I threaten him? Well, she was armed. Before I could do anything, I saw him reach for the door handle. Our eyes narrowed in on each other. He slowly opened the driver's side door about an inch. He unbuckled the seatbelt. Our eye contact did not break. He methodically began his exit from the vehicle. Fuck. He's going to come for me. I knew it. This had gone on far too long to be a joke. He's going to try to hurt me. My breathing became more erratic. My body had become trembling. I could feel sweat course down my body. My wet palms tightened around my keys. If he makes a move, I'll have to strike with these. Our eyes still hadn't broken contact. His door was wide open now. Instead of coming for me, he made a mad dash away from me, towards the door inside of the garage that led to the house. Oh, no, you don't. Instinct completely took over, and before I knew what was happening, I had unlocked my door and beeline towards the door. He'd had a head start, but I was in better shape and started to catch up quickly. He beat me to the door and tried to slam it on me. I was able to get there in the nick of time and stop it from completely closing. I don't know what this guy's intentions for me were, but they weren't good. We fought hard to win the battle for the door. He tried with all his might to keep me out. I did the same to keep that from happening. Suddenly, all the resistance I had felt was gone, and I fell forward, toppling to the floor inside the house. I lifted my head. The man was gone. Where did he go? I quickly got up and slowly moved forward. I didn't see him anywhere. It was too late to turn back now. Luckily, I knew every inch of this house like the back of my hand. There were only a few spots he could be. I ventured further into the house and reached the edge of the kitchen, my eyes quickly surveying my surroundings and my head on a swivel. I saw the knife rack over by the sink. Fuck, there were 2 empty slots. Thankfully, I wasn't empty, though. Tiptoed my way over, each step perfectly soundless. I heard the creak of the door and quickly turned. The man rushed out at me from the pantry and swung his knives at me wildly. Who the fuck are you? I was able to dodge the first swing. I nearly dodged the second, but it grazed me, creating what I imagined looked like a slanted line of blood right across my face. I bolted toward the living room. He followed in pursuit. I looked around for anything I could use to protect myself. It was the fireplace, and the fire was burning. Perfect. I grabbed a fire poker. Where are they? A massive amount of force struck me in the back and I toppled over right in front of the fireplace. I quickly shifted from back to front to see my assailant. He swung down hard with his right and narrowly avoided the blade and it lodged into the wooden floor. I wasn't so lucky the second time. The next blade plunged through my right hand and I screamed in agony. Tears immediately burst out of my eyes and my vision went blurry. I never felt such pain in my entire life, but I needed to try to remain calm. While my hand was now punctured with his knife, that also meant he was out of weapons. That was when I met with a blunt force inside of my head. The water in my eyes had already made it difficult to see. Now things had gotten fuzzy. I was seeing stars too. The man bent over me and struck me over and over. I knew somewhere my face had been busted open because I felt the warm trickle of blood flow from my temple down past my cheek. I was fading. I couldn't take much more of this before I'd be out, or worse. I pulled the only car I had left. I kicked him in the balls. He collapsed and I yanked the knife out of my hand. I swung at him with everything I had only to miss. Somehow he was already back to his feet. I swung again but he was able to break my grip of it and the knife went flying. I tackled him and he fell back into the bricks surrounding the fireplace on the left. Pictures that had been mounted above us fell and shattered everywhere. I grabbed the biggest piece I could find and pierced his leg. He let out a guttural howl. Then with every ounce of energy I had left in my body, I forced his body right into the fire. His body struggled and contorted unnaturally as his head was burned to something beyond recognition. Finally, his motion ceased. I leaned back, exhausted. He made a hell of a mess. It certainly wouldn't be easy to explain. I gently grabbed one of the pictures that had fallen, brushed off the broken glass, and took a look at it. I'll give this guy credit for one thing. He had a beautiful family. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, this sort of content, be sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and leave a comment below. There will be a link to this story in the description, as well as a link to my Patreon page where you can subscribe to my magazine/book collection called Enter Madness. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.